All right, hello, and welcome to the American Family Insurance DreamBank, where we believe in the transformative power of dreams. My name is Eric Lopez. I am a dream curator here at DreamBank, and on behalf of our team, we're glad to have you with us. Here at American Family Insurance, we believe communities are stronger and the future is brighter when people are actively pursuing their dreams. That's why we created DreamBank, an inspirational community destination and digital experience dedicated to dreamers everywhere. Our offerings are designed to help you celebrate the dream journey, overcome obstacles, and stay motivated. Now, I'd like to take a second to introduce you to our speaker, Dr. Daniel Gardenberg. Dr. Gartenberg is a sleep scientist with a PhD in cognitive psychology. He is currently the CEO of SleepSpace and an adjunct professor at Penn State University in the Department of Biobehavioral Health. Dr. Gartenberg's work focuses on developing the connected smart bedroom where natural remedies like sound, light, and temperature are used with various wearables and nearables to diagnose and treat sleep disorders and improve the sleep quality of every human being. Daniel's an inventor with 4 patents, a viral TED Talk that has more than 4 million views, and his technology has been featured on Today Show, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, as well as many more. If you have any questions for our speaker, please write them in the Q&A section and we'll try to get to them at the end. Before we start, I would also like to mention that this event will be recorded and you'll be able to find it on our Facebook and YouTube channel later this week. Now I'll go ahead and pass it over to Dr. Gartenberg. Thank you.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I hope that we're gonna really take away some helpful information for you about how every person can improve their sleep health. And this is something that I've been studying for 15 years. I've tried almost every gadget and gizmo out there. And it's more important now than ever for us to sleep, as anxieties around the news and COVID are making us sleep worse than ever. So, we're sleeping worse than we did 2 years ago, essentially, is what the data is showing, particularly more people having problems falling asleep and staying asleep because of various stressors, but also because, if we're indoor creatures and aren't very active, this actually hinders what's known as our circadian rhythm, which I think many of you have probably heard of before. And, my passion is that I think we can really heal the world through everyone just sleeping a little bit better, and we would be so much nicer to each other, and we'd also live a lot longer if we just prioritized our sleep, because it's really the cornerstone of health and well-being. The hard thing about sleep is that what's good for one person might be not good for someone else. And a classic example of this is you shouldn't take naps if you have problems falling asleep and staying asleep generally. But if you're don't have that issue, then it's perfectly healthy and good to take a nap. So that's just one example of how this is a very personalized thing, how to optimize people's sleep. And that's why I think it's been so hard for technology companies to solve this problem, because oftentimes the technology does more harm than good. Smartphone addiction is certainly not helping. And I'll get into a little later about how the data from these various devices can sometimes not be so helpful either. So feel free to think about your questions, think about your own sleep, and try to walk away with 1 to 3 things that you can do. And I'm going to tell you a lot about what you can do to improve your sleep quality. And it might be very different for different people. And if you have any questions, just put them in the chat box, and I will answer them at the end. So that being said, sleep and its health impacts. So just a little background on what is sleep and how it impacts our body. Basically, if we look at the impact that sleep has on an aspect of our body, we usually find it really strong links with hypertension, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, a lot of causal studies there. And what I study in our laboratory at Penn State in collaboration with the National Institute of Aging, is actually the link between poor sleep health and Alzheimer's disease, where there's increasing evidence that if you sleep poorly, you produce more beta amyloid plaques, which are shown to be causally related to developing Alzheimer's. Obviously, really strong links with our immune system. We can probably all relate to this. There's some really cool studies with one of my collaborators, Dr. Daniel Taylor, where if you actually, at the University of Arizona, if you actually get a COVID vaccine, or if you get a influenza vaccine and you've slept well beforehand, you produce more antibodies for the vaccine. So basically it makes vaccines more effective, and there's no reason to believe that that wouldn't be the case for a COVID-19 vaccine as well. Some things that I'm really interested in is, anxiety, depression, and decision-making and empathy. You're more likely to be self-centered and make risky decisions when you're sleep deprived. It plays a really strong role in, I can even push myself into some kind of, an activated state if I've sleep deprived myself, like a manic sort of ish state, which is a common reaction. We have a whole physiological system with the circadian rhythm that impacts this stuff, and lighting in particular. And then, so what I study in our lab is if we can help people sleep better with these new technology interventions, if we can reduce these beta amyloid plaques, essentially clear your neural waste that forms throughout the night. And that's a thing that, deep sleep in particular is thought to do, is sort of cleanse out the neural waste that your body produces through use throughout the day. It's also going to help you be more productive if you prioritize your sleep. And I've used sleep in a lot of ways to improve my productivity. You're going to make less accidents. Something that I talk about a lot is, sleep gives you that sort of metacognition to see the situation as the holistic thing that it is. And you can sort of have tunnel vision when you're sleep deprived. So sometimes it might seem like you're, working in the right direction towards something, but you haven't seen the full picture of it. You haven't seen the forest. You're just looking at the trees because your brain isn't fully restored. And there's lots of classic things with like, I forget who was it, Einstein or Edison, using naps to like ideate and stuff like this. You can use it. This is how we process the fabric of our world, is through sleep. So you can use it to enhance your cognition and reduce accidents. And there's a lot of evidence that sleep has been a major factor in the accidents that you see here at Chernobyl. What I studied when I worked for the Air Force, radio operators getting fatigued and for like supervised for drones, and back in the day with the German U-boats, and then oil spills and stuff like this. So what the hard part about sleep, how are we actually going to improve every human's sleep? And as part of this, I'm going to give everyone a month of our software, and I think you have a link to that. Excuse me. This is the new version of our software, and what we're trying to do is basically connect all the devices in the smart bedroom. So if you wear a wearable, I actually don't have my Oura Ring on right now. If you're using an Apple Watch, and then we'll take anything that publishes data to Apple or Google, and the sensors of your phone, crucially, because half of the people out there don't really want to wear anything while they sleep. A certain percentage of people like sleep naked. They're not going to want to wear anything necessarily, or definitely not a headset, that's for sure. But about 50% of people don't like to wear anything while they sleep. And so we have this nearable sensing technology. It's actually a phone charger. You can see it right here. And we use the sensors of your phone to not only charge, we're charging your phone here, but we're also using sensors to measure your sleep through the micromotions of the mattress. and then direct sound, light, and vibrations to try to enhance deeper stages of sleep. And that's been the focus of a lot of the research we've done at Penn State. And when we think about enhancing sleep, it's really like, what can we do? We can change sound, we can change light, we can change temperature to try to entrain your circadian rhythm and help you get a deeper night of sleep. There's also a lot of other things that you can do to try to do that, which I'll get into in a little bit. And so, this is sort of a typical experience of what a lot of these apps have to offer. And basically, one of the simple ways to improve sleep is to block out noises throughout the night using a classic sound machine. We like to use like a pink noise-ish sound that sort of is a little bit rolling. And we have a lot of these solutions are like water oriented. So like having ocean waves that go into pink noise, and then you have a smart alarm clock that wakes you at the right time based on a sleep goal that you or your coach set for yourself. So a lot of times when we're trying to enhance someone's sleep, we're trying to entrain a deeper a more entrenched circadian rhythm, where you're going to bed at a similar time and waking up at a similar time throughout every single day. And we can use lights to further entrain this. So you can't see it, but I have actually a happy lamp right next to me right now. And so I'm blasting myself with a lot of light. I actually have red light behind me. And we connect with smart bulbs to basically give you, usually I actually don't have red light. I usually have red light towards the nighttime. And we've done some studies showing that red light at night actually helps people more. And there's other researchers that have validated this as well. And then you want to get bright light during the day. Obviously, sunlight is really the best thing you can do. But if you're in Madison, Wisconsin, which I lived in Madison for 5 years, I think most people on this call are from Madison. And so, it can get pretty dreary with the lack of sunlight during the depths of winter. And so that's why, a happy lamp is really a simple solution to try to activate your circadian rhythm. You want a healthy circadian rhythm. You don't want a flat rhythm. So you want to, activate yourself throughout the day. But when you're thinking about your issues, you might fall into one of these buckets. This is sort of how I think about the world of sleep. There's also, anyone can optimize their sleep too. There's a huge percentage of people in the United States that are simply not getting enough sleep as well. So around 40% of people simply don't get enough sleep. Actually, I think this is a little high for insomnia, but it's more like 30%. And then there's a certain number of people that have sleep apnea, and we can talk about some of the common, how you can get diagnosed for that and speak to your doctor about that. I'm not a medical doctor. Just make sure you talk to your GP about anything medical related. You should really get diagnosed if you think you might have sleep apnea. Usually, those individuals will have a certain type of snore, and they'll be very tired during the day because they don't get good sleep quality because they're waking up basically as much as like 30 times an hour while they're sleeping because their airway is being obstructed. There's a bunch of solutions for this on the market that I'd be happy to talk you guys through if you're curious about that. My specialty and what we've been trying to validate is a new treatment for insomnia. And that's the sleep disorder that is most common, besides just people not sleeping enough. And that's if you're someone that is sleeping less than 7 hours on a regular basis, I highly think you probably aren't sleeping enough, and you should address that. So let's do a little deep dive into why we sleep and the science of sleep. And we've known for a long time that it's an energy conservation thing. So, we want to get our prey throughout the day, so we preserve our energy at night. And it's, safer in the daytime than at nighttime. We've known for a little while also, actually only like 80 years when we really started understanding what's happening in sleep, It's related to learning and memory. And only recently we've understood how it plays a role in something called the synaptic homeostasis of your brain. And there's a professor, Giuliano Tononi at the University of Wisconsin, actually, that brought this theory to life, and this is how I actually got into sleep science to some degree, is taking a course by his wife at Madison, is basically you down-regulate all the things that you process during the day in deep sleep, and you do the cell recovery thing, produce human growth hormone, all this stuff. And then during REM sleep, you sort of integrate that information into your personality and long-term memory. So it's basically down-regulating all the things that are relevant to your survival. Like, it wouldn't be useful to remember everything that happened during the day. So we sort of have this process where we filter things out basically based on our emotional response to things. And then you replay the things that were relevant to your survival during REM sleep when you're dreaming and your body is paralyzed. It relates to brain temperature and neurochemistry and getting our cells to fire correctly in animal studies. And this restoration and brain metabolic clearance stuff with Alzheimer's disease, that's sort of new science that a lot of people are studying right now. I think Matthew Walker, another prominent sleep scientist, is also investigating this connection, because Alzheimer's is probably going to be the most costly thing to the healthcare system pretty soon. So what is sleep made of? The most common model is something called a two-process model, where it's basically a combination of your sleep drive, how much you've slept, and that's known as the homeostatic component of sleep. And that basically just builds up throughout the day. And you can see the sleep load graph here. It's building up throughout the day. And you get your max load right before you go to bed. And then it dissipates as you sleep, and that reduces the sleep drive. And then you have your circadian rhythm, which in humans is a 24-hour rhythm. Sunlight, we're not like cats. We're awake during the day and we're tired at night. We're not nocturnal creatures. There's a recent New York Times article about humans used to have a second sleep. I think my analysis, and there's like Canterbury Tales and a bunch of literary pieces from like the medieval times, like 1400s, 1500s, that people used to wake up, do some stuff, and then go back to bed. And part of that is, our sleep is sort of flexible, and there's different types of sleepers. There's morning people, evening people, there's flexible people. And so part of this is knowing what you have genes for this too. You can actually get a 23andMe and figure out your circadian rhythm to some degree, your morningness and eveningness. The main thing is to, choose your side and sort of stick to it. So, if you're more consistent, you're going to have better sleep quality, because you're going to have a healthier rhythm. Your body will know when it should be tired and when it should be awake. And then you'll have a deeper quality sleep. And this also has to do with something called Zeitgebers, or time givers. So you can entrain a different circadian rhythm based on exposure to sunlight, when you eat. And so being really conscientious of these things, and if you're doing like an intermittent fasting thing, for example, which is sort of a popular craze a little bit, you got to make sure that you are expending energy when you ought to have your peak like circadian alertness, and you're eating at that time too. You can throw it off a little bit with if you don't do the fasting correctly. So I have to move a little faster here. This is sort of the science behind your sleep need. You have this buildup of adenosine, and that's what corresponds to this function on the right. That's the neurochemical that corresponds to it. And coffee actually suppresses this, and that's what keeps you awake. Where basically caffeine suppresses this adenosine thing. And so, this is a little more on the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis. It's really interesting theory. and how this is important for remembering things. And this is what the stages really look like. It's quite magical to actually see someone's brain waves on an EEG. And in our studies, I've stayed up all night looking at people's brain waves and seeing their brains shift between these various stages. If you're in REM sleep, your eyes are literally darting around, rolling in the back of your head, and you can see that on the EEG. And then when they're in deeps and their body is totally paralyzed. And when people are in deep sleep, which is sort of it's more complicated than even the stages. Some say there's as many as 19 stages, but generally we've known for the past 60 years that there's these 4, and sometimes Europeans say there's 5, but it's just a way of breaking things up. But in deep sleep, you have these long burst brain waves where your brain is functioning very differently than waking life. And this is sort of when you wake up all flustered and you don't know where you are, maybe for like an early flight. Deep sleep is usually in the beginning part of the night. So if in the first 2 cycles, if you wake up during that time, you're more likely to wake up in deep sleep. And we've been trying to find ways to enhance deep sleep for in our lab for a while. We showed we can do it to some degree with audio stimulation, but I wasn't totally convinced by that paper that we published. So that's what we've been working on for a long time. When we think about the stages, people ask this question a lot: what is good quality sleep? Usually you want more REM and you want more deep sleep. And basically 99% of people adults need at least 7 hours on a regular basis. There's a committee of folks here. I'll show you. This changes with age to some degree. You might remember needing more sleep at a certain time in your life. Some people think you need a little less when you get older. I don't necessarily agree with this. I think you probably need 7 to 9. I think it's just older people sleep less and have more health issues. But I think a healthy person would usually want 7 to 9. Obviously, if you're sick or something, or if you work out a lot, you might need a little more. So this, not only does this fluctuate between people, some people need 7, some people need 9. That's a pretty big range. Almost everyone falls into this range very consistently. Standard bell curve here. 30% of people don't sleep enough. So, you might be one of these people, and just figuring out times to sleep. And we think about this over a 24-hour period to keep in mind too. So if you don't have problems falling asleep and staying asleep, you could, for example, take a nap to get the full amount. And that is a strategy that can be effective. But going back to here, this can fluctuate even within a person. So if I worked out, did a really heavy weightlifting thing, or if I'm sick, my body might need more sleep. So a lot of this is being able to, what I call having metacognition of your bodily and psychological states, and knowing when you need more or less, and listening to your body when it's giving you the cues that you need more. It's not normal for you to feel constantly tired throughout the day. And so something might be going on. You're either not, and if you're getting enough sleep, you think, but you're still tired during the day, then that would lead me to believe that there might actually be something going on, and you should see a doctor to have that looked at, especially if you're sleeping like 8 hours and you're still tired, basically. So we're a chronically sleep deprived nation, and it hasn't gotten any better since COVID, basically. And we're sleeping a full hour less than we did in the 1940s. So a lot of this is probably due to lights and technology and our always on society. And so we're just more activated at night now, and that sort of messes with our circadian rhythm. Maybe there's more anxiety going on with all this technology too. And so for whatever reason, we're not sleeping as much. And I really believe that, our leaders and our whole society would function a lot better if we just prioritize the sleep a little bit more. And that's been our life mission at SleepSpace. So just getting a little bit more into this circadian process, you know, you might also experience that this changes with age. Kids can definitely push us into being much more of a morning person. Um, and, you know, when we're in our teenage years, we're usually more of a night owl to sort of get away from our parents. Some people, some evolutionary biologists think. But a lot of this is, you know, we're more flexible. We can change, we can activate our genes based on external cues from our environment. So if you expose yourself to sunlight, you know, you should get at least, you know, 30 minutes of sunlight before noon every day. You know, that can activate these genes in your body that control, obviously controls melatonin. And so, you know, it functions on that whole system. But you can entrain a different circadian rhythm, and I've shifted mine. You know, I used to be more of a night owl, and then I started going to, you know, I started in training a earlier bedtime, having my meals earlier, getting this. You can shift it with a smart light, with a happy lamp, getting that light exposure earlier. So we have control over this rhythm is what I'm trying to say. And so just think about what is your healthy rhythm and try to be consistent with it. And that's probably going to give you a healthier night of sleep. You know, generally, this is the way that we think about it in sleep science, where you have a wake up window where your brain is sort of revving up. We call this sleep inertia in sleep science. And then you have your first peak of the day, and a morning person might have a higher peak at this point than an evening person. The evening person, they would have the highest peak later on. And then usually after, you know, especially a heavy lunch, and especially if you haven't slept enough, you'll experience a little siesta time, you know, post afternoon, maybe a good time to take a 20-minute nap here if you haven't slept enough and you don't have sleep problems. And then you get another peak alertness sometime after that, before dinner. You know, this is another good window to work out. You know, it's good to work out during the peak windows. Basically, also, you're less likely to injure yourself because you're stretched out sort of more in the afternoon peak. So, you know, the timing of exercise will also shift this rhythm. So a morning person, if you want to entrench that rhythm, it's recommended to exercise more in the morning. If you want to, you know, stick to your night owl rhythm, and there's nothing inherently wrong with being a night owl. Some people seem to think that, but you know, our society sort of biases against night owls just because it's less like this because of COVID. That's actually one of the advantages of COVID a little bit. You can see the night owls shine a little bit more because there's less pressure to wake up in the morning to go commute to work. But if you're consistent as a night owl, that can be just as good. So, you know, this also impacts traveling if you're doing a time shift, and these are just some general suggestions. It gets quite complicated, and it matters if you're going east or west here. I can go into that if folks have questions. And then this is sort of the stages with age. And one of the things that, you know, we're investigating is this lack of deep sleep. As we get older, you typically get less and less deep sleep. Interestingly, if you learn a lot that day, what it does is you actually get more deep sleep because your brain is learning and processing that information. So, you know, I think that's been one of my theories for why, you know, just learning as we get older is actually giving us more regenerative deep sleep. And that could be one of the reasons why learning new tasks is something associated with cognitive decline. This is sort of the evidence for how sleep impacts every biological process. I'm not going to go into depth on all this stuff, but there's a lot of evidence for cardiometabolic disease. There's a lot of evidence for diabetes. You know, there's some causal evidence, but you will have more irregular cell growth and cancer because it's really this cleansing system of sleep. Really good causal evidence for immunity. This is my area of focus, and this is like a 1.5-fold increase in developing Alzheimer's disease compared to healthy people based on fragmented sleep is explaining that. Another study showed that folks were 30% more likely to get diagnosed if they're short sleepers, people that don't sleep enough, essentially. And then there's the mouse studies and the causal stuff down here too. And then we talked about the cleansing out, and we talked about this already. So what can we do? How do we measure? The way we think about measuring sleep is you can't get better than EEGs connected to the head. So, but that's really not that comfortable. So you have this trade-off between comfort and accuracy. We also have a sleep diary. Sometimes just the way how you evaluate your sleep is the best way to measure your sleep. And that's what we actually use if someone has insomnia. That's one of the main things that a doc will do is we'll have them fill out a standard sleep diary. And I've tracked everything with this, and I really understand my sleep in a deep way. Oura Ring, we have a paper comparing Oura Ring, Apple Watch, and another wearable. And they're pretty accurate at stages. They can do more harm than good sometimes, especially if you're anxious about your sleep, because sometimes they say that you got like 10 minutes of deep sleep, and they're just like, they can be significantly off from measuring things like deep sleep and REM. We have an algorithm that does that on the Apple Watch. If you're an Apple Watch user, you can download SleepSpace and see your deep sleep and REM. It's just, you should sort of take that with a grain of salt. These devices are really good at measuring sleep wake, but you really sort of, to get real accuracy on sleep stages, you need polysomnography, these EEGs. That are connected to folks. It was actually only recently discovered in 1953. These different stages were really first explained, and when we hooked people up to electrodes. So, really sleep is sort of a newer science in a lot of ways, and I think we're only beginning to see how we can use sleep to literally program and enhance our brains. This is a little more sleep science. So some people have these things called sleep spindles that keep you asleep, essentially. And there's this thing called a K complex where your brain can sort of wake up from external stimuli. So there's this process that keeps you asleep while also monitoring your external environment. And that's something that we've tried to understand, this sort of tension between your sleeping mind processing things and you actually being awake or asleep. And if we understand this tension really well, we can maybe enhance sleep, and we have these deep sleep stimulating sounds where we're trying to do that. And this is sort of a standard sleep diary. We made a digital version of this, and this is what these sleep specialists, these board certified sleep specialists use when they're helping people with insomnia. Something that you might not know is the recommended treatment for insomnia isn't a drug or anything. It's cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, which is typically a 6-week program where you go over different ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving around your sleep. And changing those simple behaviors is the thing that's going to really solve something like insomnia in the long term. That's cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. But there's not enough people trained in this. So usually if you go to an MD, the most likely thing that they'll give you is a sleeping pill. And so, this is sort of why we have our grant funding with this professor at Penn State and this other guy at University of Arizona, is to solve this problem and make this what you should have is these behavioral treatments, make it more effective. And this is some of our laboratory research where this is someone's actually EEG, and we showed that we can play these sounds, which is the bottom part, the audio channel here, and we could sort of entrench these deeper brain waves. This is our chief scientific officer in one of his papers showing the accuracy of our Apple Watch algorithm. So this Apple Watch is the SleepSpace algorithm compared to Oura Ring. and some other gold standard measures. So they're really accurate at measuring sleep wake. This is a good result that we're getting. You want a result in the upper left corner. But with the stages, it's just not quite as accurate. So one paper showed that the stages for aura is only about 65% accuracy for light, 51% for deep, and then 61% for REM. And so, and that's average. So for certain people, it can be really off, is sort of my point. And now there's this issue with the clinicians hate some of these devices and they call it orthosomnia, where you see this data, it makes you more anxious, and then you have a worse night of sleep. So understanding how the data can either help or hurt is sort of where we're at in sleep science and how to use this data to actually help people. We think we figured out a way to do it with this platform that's guided by a coach, where you can get these customized programs, and it works with a bunch of different devices. So I'm just going to now run over some quick solutions if you are someone that has problems falling asleep and staying asleep. And there's a difference between someone that has periodic insomnia versus chronic. It's pretty normal for you to sometimes have problems falling asleep, especially if it's, something in your life just happened, a breakup or, a job issue. It's just when this starts becoming on a regular basis, that's when we think of it as a problem. And usually we think about it as a problem if you're spending less than 85% of your time in bed asleep on a regular basis, based on not the wearables, but based on the sleep diary metrics. And this is how we measure it on a sleep diary. These are the questions that we ask. And so what are some basic tips if this is an issue for you? Stop drinking coffee after noontime because it actually has a pretty long half-life. I'm actually pushing my limit a little bit here. I'm doing it at 2. I don't have a sleep problem necessarily though, but as even a healthy sleeper, it's, you should cut it off at around 2. Obviously, alcohol destroys your sleep. I think most people can, if they've ever drank too much, can appreciate that. Even knowing your 1 glass probably is fine, especially if you're used to it periodically to take the tension off. I'm not, totally strict about that as some people are. But it can really hurt your sleep. And if you ever track your sleep with a wearable, you'll probably see that. And you might not be that conscious of it necessarily. Doing stimulating things, even exercise, nicotine too close to bed, that can be problematic. Making your bedtime a sleep sanctuary, that's a big thing that we try to show people how to do. Make it the right temperature, only sleep and have sex in your bed. That's the thing that a lot of the sleep specialists say. And it's not that big of, you shouldn't go to bed like really hungry. It's not that bad to eat like a little snack before bed, especially if you have a sleep problem. And too much fluids can be bad. So planning how much when you're drinking water and stuff. And this is how we think about how this usually happens. So usually we have something predisposing, like genetically maybe, or even just getting older. Some people are just genetically have more muscle tension, and that's a predisposing factor. And then you have usually some kind of life event that sort of triggers your predisposing aspects of your body to being more hypervigilant. And then you start forming these harmful habits around when you start not sleeping, then you start forming these reinforcing habits that make you sleep worse and worse. Maybe that's spending too much time in bed, going to bed at erratic times, and these are called perpetuating factors. And this is sort of the cycle of what forms with insomnia. And a big thing to address this is sort of associating your bed with sleep, what's known as stimulus control. So only going to bed when tired, getting out of bed if you can't sleep for 15 minutes or more. Having a wind down, we're not meant to fall asleep right away, but in training yourself that now is time to fall asleep. And we have this wind down experience, with my software, obviously, where everything turns red in the home automatically. And when we hit our wind down, it'll play some ocean waves 10 minutes before our bedtime. and then it'll seamlessly go into our sound machine and turn off all the lights. And usually we'll read. It's not bad to read in bed necessarily if you don't have a sleep problem, but if you did, it would be better to read outside of bed, and then, or watch TV outside of bed, or do a relaxing activity before sleep if you have a sleep problem. And it could be helpful to anybody who wants to optimize. So, obviously I mentioned this a couple of times, but consistency is key, and not taking naps if you have a sleep problem, because that can sort of throw everything off. And usually what they'll do is, it's a little counterintuitive, but if you're having problems being awake in bed, it's actually recommended to sort of restrict the time in bed a little bit, and that'll build up your homeostatic, drive to sleep, and it'll actually start consolidating your sleep. And this is one of the main things that the sleep specialist recommends. If you think you have insomnia, try to see a sleep specialist or a trained sleep doc or psychologist in your clinical psychologist in your area. And so another big part of this is training your relaxation muscles. So similar to like going to the gym and training your biceps, everyone should, and it's kind of sad we haven't taught our children this. Every person should be able to reliably reduce their heart rate with some kind of practice. I don't have strong opinions on what does that for you. In our software, we have a bunch of meditations, some sleep stories, and you can get it for 30 days for free to try out. We have some passive muscle relaxation, some yoga nidra. There's lots of things that can relax you, even listening to ocean waves or different tones. So just find what's right for you. That's the key. And there's a ton of resources on like YouTube and stuff like this too. And then the other thing is thinking about your sleep differently. So sometimes we form these maladaptive thoughts like, I'll lose my ability to even be able to fall asleep. My insomnia is so bad. That's sort of someone running away with, every human needs to sleep. If we don't sleep, we actually die. And there's a genetic disorder where people don't sleep and they actually do die shortly after they're born. So, you're not going to lose your ability to fall asleep. Everyone has this natural ability. And if you only very rarely do people not, and they don't survive. But there's other sleep issues, right? And so these are the other main ones. These are less behavioral. You have to actually see, usually MDs treat these problems, whereas a psychologist would usually deal with insomnia. Sleep apnea is pretty common. There's also something, and that's where you can have it from your brain or obstructive. Obstructive is much more common. Usually it's associated with being overweight. And it can be severe or moderate. And there's you really should use the sleep apnea if that's the case, the CPAP, the face mask, if that's the case. Sometimes a dentist has a solution for a milder case. They have this mouth plate that you can use. Restless leg, it can be diet related. There can be stretching things to do. There's also some medications for this. Narcolepsy, usually you'd have to go to a sleep lab and have a neurologist diagnose you with this. There's narcolepsy without cataplexy, where most people think about it as falling asleep randomly, but it is possible to have narcolepsy without that too. So what is going to happen in the future with our sleep? And, we think that we can use technology to finally improve people's sleep quality eventually. And what this has to do is, creating this portal for your coach or your clinician to see all your data, getting these tips on how to optimize using the light. And so this is a study we did with Google and LifeX, where we showed that having these wind down procedures with LifeX smart bulbs can actually help improve perceived sleep quality. There's these consumer devices for measuring brain waves. I use some of these. Sometimes it's a little hard to wear these, and they're not terribly comfortable. And, we're starting to really get pretty good accuracy for not having to wear these with things like the smart bed nearable thing that we invented, and using the Apple Watch and other wearables. And a lot of this is trying to use sounds to block out disruptive noises. And you'd be surprised, even like an air conditioning turning on at night. I've seen people's brains waking up from something like that. So you want to block out, disruptive noises at night. And it's actually the fluctuation of noises. So if you have a sound mask, it's sort of masking all the sounds so they're less abrupt. And because your brain wakes up based on like a predator approaching you. So if you can have like a sound mask, it'll block out those sounds, and you can have a deeper night of sleep. And sort of the future of this is playing sounds in such a way to try to enhance what you remembered throughout the day. And there's something in sleep science called targeted memory reactivation, where you can create these associations between certain things you want to remember throughout the day with sound or smell, and then replay the sound or smell during your dream state and actually prime that state. And you would then remember, there's some evidence that you could remember the things that you wanted to remember, such as when you were smelling roses, doing a task, and then you smell the roses when you're in REM sleep. You encode that information from the task through associations, and then you remember it better the next day. So that's sort of the far out future of sleep science that I like to geek out about. And we have some intellectual property on all that stuff. And then the other big thing, and there's some solutions for this, and we're working with some companies on this that have this technology, is manipulating temperature to help you fall asleep. And there's some good evidence that temperature, when you can reduce it to help someone fall asleep. And there's also an ideal temperature in REM, because you lose thermal regulation in REM. So there might be a way to enhance sleep that way. And so, yeah, this is the end of the presentation here. I'm excited to take some questions. Feel free to try out our software. We give you a 30-day free trial. And I think you guys have a link for that. So I am happy to take some questions now.
All right. Sorry, just give me a second. I'm coming back on the screen. Perfect. Okay. So yeah, we do have a few questions. It's been a pretty active comment section. So Stuart and also Tammy kind of asked, I think you went over it a little bit. How does napping play into the amount of like time sleeping that you get at night?
Yeah, so we think about sleep need as like a 24-hour, or on a 24-hour basis. So if you think your sleep need is 7 hours, and you sleep 6.5 hours, and you take a 30-minute nap, you would meet your 7-hour sleep need.
Perfect. And then a couple of people also asked about the trackers. I think you also went over that vaguely. Was how accurate are these, the Fitbits, the Apple Watches, and I guess how much can you trust them to display accurate numbers?
Yeah, so we have like that peer-reviewed paper that it's on our site, sleepspace.com, and where we share the accuracy against polysomnography. So for the stages, our new algorithm is going to be, I think they're all going to peak out around 80% accuracy for the stages. I was showing you some data from another researcher that showed they were only around 60% accurate. They're getting increasingly more accurate. I think they'll max out around 80%. Also, a lot of this is like relative truth. So it'll give you good comparisons relative to yourself, right? So if you compare your own data from night to night, and that's how I use them mostly. I don't necessarily believe the number that it says for my deep sleep, but I believe that if it says I got, an hour one night and 40 another night, that I did better on the hour night than the 40 night.
Gotcha. Perfect. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. And then also, is there a value to resting without falling asleep?
Is there value to resting without falling? Yeah, so you're still getting regenerative brain waves when you're like meditating and stuff, for sure. You're producing these theta brain waves, but at a certain point, the sleep is just more regenerative. Like there's some people that are like, I can just meditate and I don't need to sleep. Like, no, you actually do need like the deeper delta waves. And some meditate. I mean, I think you can get into these really deep meditations and get close to it, but I don't think you're ever, unless you're asleep, that's really when you get these deep delta brainwaves.
Gotcha. Thank you. And then I guess the last one here, can a light lamp substitute the getting of sunlight before noon guidance?
Oh yeah, so that's if you have, it's the main thing is to have a 10,000 lux light. I use this Verilux thing that's right next to me right now, and I also use the LifeX smart bulbs that sort of creates my whole ambiance, and then I augment it with this happy lamp called a Verilux.
Nice. Yeah, I have, moving up to Wisconsin, we had to get a happy lamp ourselves, and it's a little too bright for my taste, but I guess if you're not staring at it and you have it.
No, yeah, I wouldn't recommend like staring into it directly. If I did that right now, it's like burning my eyes. So, but the main thing is to have it close to you, and then I don't look directly at it, and it's getting the light. You can see it a little bit on me right now.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, could you clarify again? What's the wattage of the light bulb?
10,000 lux.
10,000 lux. Perfect. And then someone else asked if you could share the slide deck. I mean, it is going to be, the slide deck will be available, I guess, through the YouTube video. People can go ahead and watch the video once it's up on YouTube. But I guess, would you be able to share a copy of it for people?
No, yeah, I don't really share like a raw copy of it, but you can see it on.
Gotcha. They can go ahead and pause as they're watching this along. Yeah. Perfect. Yes. And just to clarify again for everyone watching, that the YouTube video will be up on Friday. The video will be up on YouTube and on our Facebook page on Friday by end of day. We usually upload everything that we have during the week at that time. Yeah, I think. And then, okay. So for the 30-day free trial, I did try looking for that code on my end. Is it possible to share it here in the chat for
yeah. So
everyone?
It's just SleepSpace /union. So I'll post it on the chat, www.sleepspace.com/union, and that'll give you instructions on how to redeem it. And so all you do is you type union in when you download the app, and that'll unlock a 30-day free trial.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
If you go to this link, that gives you detailed instructions on how to do it. Sleepspace.com/union.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I'm just going to go ahead and give you guys a quick outro. Here at DreamBank, we truly believe in the power of dreams and celebrate that our community is made up of fearless dreamers. As we wrap up, we actually always like to ask our speakers this one question. Daniel, what is one piece of advice that you have for someone who is pursuing their dream right now?
Yeah, I mean, take a breath, train your relaxation, and get a deep night of sleep on a regular basis. And that's gonna, help you think big picture on what you need to do to accomplish your goals. I really believe that it's worked well for me. And so, it's sleep allows us to think big picture and strategize. And so also it helps our health, energy, and all the other good stuff, being empathic towards others.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for that. And to all of you who tuned in, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to continuing to learn, grow, and dream together. You can learn more about our upcoming DreamBank events and content designed with your dreams in mind at amfam.com/dreambank and by connecting with us on our social channels. On behalf of American Family Insurance and DreamBank, we look forward to hosting you again soon. And until then, keep dreaming fearlessly, and thank you. Bye.